let's get out of LA and fly up into the valley for our next bit, heading into the 80s. We're going to head out to a ranch up in Simi Valley, and that's going to take us out of LA, across the San Fernando Valley, which is where Valley Girls and the term for Valley Girls came from. And here we are in Walnut Grove. So we're looking back at LA here, and we are up in the hills. So here's the location of the little house. There's the town of Walnut Grove, and obviously there's nothing else there anymore because the set was famously destroyed at the end. Now, this show was filmed in the 70s, but again, it was, I think the finales went on in the 80s, so we're going to include it here. So what if instead of exploding the set, as they did in the series, what if we took the set out a different way? And because we are in the HEC-RAS realm, let's try to do it with a flood. So let's see where that flood would end up going. So let's open up RAS Mapper and have a look. Here you can see the little house location and Walnut Grove. And again, this is like more than a PMF event. And it looks to me like it's taking out the little house site, but not Walnut Grove. Okay, so you can see it right there. One thing I wanted to point out with this one, though, we are in an area where, up in the Simi Valley, where we don't have that same LiDAR coverage. So this is just based on SRTM data. So if I turn off the imagery, you can see how coarse this actually is. And you may be tempted to use really big grid sizes on this, and you know, it's just something where you can't really trust the results very much when you're on a 30-meter grid that's been shot from space. But as another issue here, and a warning flag that I wanted to just make sure I've put out there, is don't just look at the max here, look at how the flood wave is arriving. And if you ever see a flood wave arriving like this, and this just happens to be the 30-meter grid that I've got for my computational cells that I've put underneath this one. If you ever see it arriving like that, it's got a vertical wetting front, and that means that you've got some Courant number violations. And as a matter of fact, I ran this same one and had too coarse a time step here, and when I ran the same events with adaptive time steps turned on, you can see how nothing else, I didn't change the geometry, didn't change the grid size, didn't change anything. All I did was turn on adaptive time steps. And you can see here, you would have been fine with adaptive time steps. All you're doing here is mapping the instabilities and the fact that it couldn't keep up with itself due to the coarse computational time step. Now that can make a big difference in your downstream inundation footprint, particularly in a dam breach model or something like that. One thing I wanted to point out here is when you get into these houses, there is actually a very famous house that is right in the first row of houses that you're going to get to. So let's have a look at Google Earth and see what that is. So we'll move from one TV show here into a movie still in the 80s. And when we get here, this is a movie that freaked me out to no end at the age of 12. The previous owners of our house had actually excavated a pond in our backyard that bordered on the woods. And when I'd go running back there, I would run past that pond very, very fast after I saw this movie. So yes, this pool is very famous right here. And again, that's you can see up there, that's a little house up on the horizon there. And that flood wave that comes down, let's see if we will hit the Poltergeist pool. So yeah, here it is in RAS Mapper. So there's the pool. If you bring it in with without the adaptive time steps and use too coarse a grid, you can see that you're inundated. This one with adaptive time steps, you are not. So it can make, look at how big that difference is, again, just by changing the time step. And again, check what happens here as you bring this in. As the flood wave arrives, when you start seeing that pixelation, and if I plotted this out with a profile line, you would see a vertical wetting front that it should be interpolating out to the terrain, but it's not. It's going to the computational grid. And here it goes. And when it hits it and inundates it, again, these are just the instabilities that got to it. It's not actually in the floodplain. Now, one more thing I wanted to point out with this particular model here, if I zoom in on this and just have a look at the terrain, I can actually build the pool in, like you see here, where it slopes down and then has a deep end down there. So let me just show you how that works with control points. We did this a bit in episode 5. So I'll turn off the aerial photo, and you can see here all I've done is drawn a rectangle here, and then I put some control points in. And again, one thing that I hadn't pointed out in the previous one is that when you edit these, you can actually go in and have a look at these control points and what their elevations are. So you can see the control points that I set right here at each corner. I set these 4 to be the same, and then I slope this one up quite a bit, so that's a kind of almost a vertical wall there, and then this is a sloping face. So you can see there I've got a deep end, and then that's the shallow end that she actually slides down back into the pool full of corpses. So continuing our 80s theme, let's go visit another pool that is famous in an 80s movie, and you'll see Danny walking right past this one here, and this is the Karate Kid apartment. And you can see when he looks at that pool, initially it's empty, but let's see if we can fill it in. So this video is getting way too long, so I'll just show you on RAS Mapper here rather than doing it live. I'll show you what I did to build the apartment here. So I'm basing this off an aerial photo, which you can do if you have that available to you. You can see the shape, the outline of it here. And what I've done is just gone in and created a polygon, multi-point layer on the outside, and I'm just drawing in one of them at one polygon on the outside with the height of the building. So if I click on the actual terrain file here, then I should see the elevations. And again, these are the elevations of the LiDAR. This is the smoothed, filtered to bare earth LiDAR. So the buildings have been removed. If I needed to put that in there, again, I've got a polygon on the outside. I put this up at 245. I put another one up at 245 here. Then on the inside, I drop it right back down to 232. So this is a steep drop. And then I put the pool in at the same elevation as the ground, and then do another polygon right there. So when you look through this thing, and I can fill this up with water, I've got basically a pool down in the middle. And then if Mr. Miyagi forgets to turn off the water when he fills that pool back in, I can give this an initial condition, is what I've done when I first modeled this one, and then do an internal boundary condition, and then you can fill it up inside of here. This whole thing is impervious if your grid sizes are small enough to be intercepted by the roof of the building on the outside. So again, most of these are workshop ideas, and I do want your feedback on whether these, which ones you'd like to do in the courses coming up, because I'm putting these, some of these ones, selected ones, into a manual. So let's go to another famous 80s house out here, and we'll find another one that's alongside a drainage channel. This one alongside a natural drainage channel, not one of the concrete ones like you see in along the LA River and in the urban basins. So this is the house that was famously saran wrapped with that long driveway there. And yeah, there's nothing in the backyard except this gully. So are they in the floodplain? Let's have a look. I'll pull up RAS Mapper here and see how much flow it would take and who's going to get hit first. So if I bring some flow down, you can see they've got a sedimentation basin down there just downstream. If I ramp it up just enough, that's the ET house right there. Let's see what happens. And yep, they got a little basin right up above there, and they're the first ones to get hit. Let's have a look in the 3D viewer and see if we can kind of recreate this flight that they took. I did a flight path you can see coming down the driveway here as the boys were doing. This is ET's perspective from the bike in the front. So as we come down the driveway, and you notice in the movie a lot of these houses weren't built yet, and they were still just building paths pads, which again, when I saw this movie and I was like 12, I thought, wow, on the BMX bike, that would be awesome. So here you go, jumping over each of these things, jumping over the cop cars. We're following along with the movie clip that you see there in the background, but then we'll turn around and go up. Again, we want to make this about HEC-RAS, so we'll point out a few things about the basin as well. And just while we're watching this, I did want to just point out that that sedimentation basin, I'm not going to do any examples today in this video about sediment transport, but we will be building some tutorial models, and this might be one of the ones that we use for this sediment transport module. So again, there you can see this is it's a pretty steep terrain. We're at a 2-to-1 exaggeration here, so it's not quite that steep, but as we come around, you can see the water coming into that basin, spilling over the spillway, coming through a culvert. See that? I've popped a culvert into that one, and then there's some overtopping flow. Now the boys take off on their bike ride and coming up into the sky, and they'll go up and float out in front of the moon. So again, let me just back up here and show you this basin here, and you can watch the flood come in and hit the house as well. So here it fills up and goes over the spillway after coming through that culvert, and then we'll have it eventually it'll overtop the road. But let me zoom in on the house here and show you what happens to their house when this flood gets up high enough. So the house is right there. So anyway, a little bit of fun with the ET house. So one other thing I wanted to point out here, this is just a schematic of how that model was built, and again, very simple, just one culvert in there with some brake lines and near repeats. But if you wanted to fill up a basin initially and choose the level, you can use the internal boundary condition to do so, and I've brought in some flow. But you may initially want to set the level, and you could do an initial condition water level, but it's going to be across your entire 2D area. So one thing you may want to do, let me just save this as a 1D file here. And even if you're not going to run this one, if I just take this 2D area and just delete it, I've now got a copy of it elsewhere. But if I draw the basin itself here as the storage area and just come around the outside as high as you're going to want to go with that, and then close it off. Now I've got this basin here, and I'll call this ET sediment. And now with this one here, one thing that you may want to do is to edit this storage area, and you can go in here now and compute this EV table from the terrain. It will ask you for the maximum that you want it to go up to, and once you've done that, now you've got this stage volume relationship here. Here's your elevation, here's your volume, and so if you wanted it to start at a particular stage, you come across here, there's the volume, and so if you use your internal boundary condition and make sure that you've filled it with that volume, so you need to use the time factor in there as well, then you'll get it starting at that stage. So again, that's just a little hack for a starting water surface elevation. So let me close all those windows out, and switching backgrounds here, let's finish off our 80s movies with one of the classic scenes of all time with John Cusack here. This looks like he's holding the boombox outside of Diane's window. So here's Lloyd. So if we're looking for filming locations that are next to flood control channels, here's another one. This is a bit smaller, but his car is actually parked right here. So where is Diane's window? Let's have a look there at where that was filmed. So if we fly over the hills, it's actually 10 kilometers away here in the other valley. So here's the window. So you may want to work out how many decibels would be required for something that's 10 kilometers away, but yeah, it would need a little bigger boom box there from Lloyd. So let's go back to the park where this was filmed and have a look and see if we can flood out the area where his car is sitting. Now, I read online that when they first filmed this, The car was actually parked outside the driveway, and he had the boombox sitting on the hood, and it was a totally different song that was playing. So it makes you wonder how movies would be so different if different decisions had been made, if they'd kept that first plan. But as a last-minute decision, when they went past this park, they decided, hey, this is where we ought to film it. Now, as hydraulic engineers, let's have a look at this catchment, the watershed up here. If that unleashed a flood that had to cross over this park, and with the flood water coming into this drainage control channel, what would happen? And let's have a look here and maybe do it with a little bit of background music. So here comes that flood. And I'll bet you didn't know, but the reason he had to hold the ghetto blaster up so high above his head was because he was afraid of it getting wet on the car. So anyway, that rounds out the 80s for us. So there you go. Let's go to one quick other place if we're talking about John Cusack here. There is one classic scene where he jumps off a bridge, and that's something that I just wanted to show you. It's a composite bridge that we may end up throwing into one of our workshops. He does end up landing in a garbage truck when he jumps off this one, and better off dead. So have a look at this one and think about what a pain this would have been to do before version 6.0 in a 2D model. But now you can go in and put the main drainage in here, have some overflows on the sides, and do this all right within your 2D model. On that same movie, let's go up and I'll show you one more thing that we'll cover with water-sensitive urban design. And you can see we'll change the capacity of some of these drains on the side of the road here. So all three of Lane's drag races happen right here in this stretch in the movie. You can see some of these photos here. There are some drainage issues right there. It's where his car gets flooded up a bit. He almost runs the nuns over right there. But have a look at this stormwater inlet pit there and see what they've changed here. Water-sensitive urban design. We could go in and have a look at how that might affect the capacity of your drainage. But having just looked at the image of the ghetto blaster there, one question I do have, my biggest question here is, wow, why does the last nun here have that huge ghetto blaster? And she has to get out of the way when Lane almost runs her over. So if you ever watch this movie again, watch for the drainage features here. So that takes us through the 80s. Now we're going to move into the 90s. So this one is actually easy to find. We'll go back to Reseda for it. And I think the reason it's easy to find is because there's the street sign. Right there, it tells you right where it's at. So for this one, we're going to go back into the drainage channels. And have a look at energy and momentum principles with and some debris loading on the culvert piers. So with that, let's have a look at this one, and I'll pull it into HEC-RAS Mapper. So here's the intersection right here where the truck, and they actually launched the truck right off of this one in the movie, but I'll pull up HEC-RAS Mapper and we'll have a look at how we can load this pier, or put a pier into it. So let's zoom in on this area in HEC-RAS Mapper and have a look at the terrain. The terrain in this particular area, and I could have downloaded any of the files that were available, but this one already had the bridge decks removed from large structures as it was filtered down to bare earth. So you could go and put this back in and build this as a culvert, or if you're looking at something that's not pressure flow, we could just look at how a pier behaves. So one thing we hadn't done, even though we've had two previous videos on terrain modification, we hadn't yet picked up this one for piers, elongated piers. So let's go ahead and try this one here. We'll put in the T2 culvert pier, and that way when we stick this in here, it's going to give you an initial shape. Once you put that in, you can start changing this around. So the existing ground around here is about, I think, 265. We'll rotate this to the angle of the channel there, and 5 meters is a bit wide for a pier. Let's go with 3. And just to show how this can be different on different ends, let's use sharp on one end and rounded on the other. Let's make the length about 40, and we'll have the radius the same. If it's a 3 meter pier, let's go 1.5 on the round radius, and have a look here at what this looks like when we're done. And we could put as many of these in as we wish. I can edit these just like any other features, but when we go in here and click on the terrain, you can see it's up at 265 here, goes down to 261, and then it's back up at 265 there and back down again. So again, sometimes you'll see these on the upstream edge, and we've got a rounded one on the downstream edge. So that's just one of the extra features that we can do in our terrain modification tools. Now, while we're in Reseda, speaking of 90s movies, I thought we'd just go down the street to Wayne and Garth's house, and there wouldn't be much going on with big drainage here. This would just be within their individual little suburb here, maybe some street drainage, but let's try a couple of terrain modification tools here as well. And yeah, what I want to show you here, there's Wayne's house and Garth's house right across the street. Just some of the differences in the terrain that you might get. So this was the filtered version. Then when we take that off, this look at how different that is. Now in front of his house here, some of these trees ended up in the terrain. So if we wanted to take those out, I do think sometimes the old school way without the terrain modifications is the way to go still. So that way you can get a couple cross sections and get these linear features in there. One thing though, I have built this little car back in here using the same methods that we did for that airport hangar in the beginning. So you can see this is the Camaro that you saw sitting in the driveway, and you can see it coming up. There's the nose of the car. Sometimes you want those obstructions there for the flow or for energy. See, there you go. So anyway, I just wanted to do that one for fun. I do appreciate your patience with this very long video. I promise I'll never make one this long again. I'll break these up into smaller bits. So just a couple more stops in the 90s. I don't know if this counts for a movie tour, but everyone was glued to their televisions during the OJ trial, so I thought we'd visit his house here. So it looks like it's been reconstructed since the day, but one thing I didn't realize is just a couple houses away, Will Smith, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. That's the filming location right there, or at least for the exterior shots. Let's go ahead and have a look at that one from the other side, and maybe we'll follow the Bronco Chase as well. So again, there's OJ's house and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air's house. So let's go out to the Bronco Chase scene here. And in this case, we'll again just have a look at how we might modify some terrain for urban stormwater models. And is this going to be suitable for us to put into HEC-RAS? So yeah, again, you can see this is the off-ramp he takes, and yeah, people were lining up here, but let's have a look at this. What if you wanted to build a flood model out here and have it be realistic? So let me get myself out of the way here, and I'll just show you a couple of the different terrain data sets that I've downloaded here. This is one that's filtered, so you can see that it's been stripped to bare earth, and you can see where it's been triangulated there, where they've done some modifications to it. There is one, if you grabbed some of the ground only points, they'll separate these out, and you could go in and use this layer and then just replace no data values with a value to put the deck in if you wanted it to be there, or you could merge it together and have the two of them come together as well and put this into a single terrain surface. So again, if you're having a look at this when we take a look in Google Earth here, and look, there's the Getty up there. You can see sometimes you might want to open it up and let flow go through. Sometimes it might just be solid. And so it may make sense to have it like this with a big gap in between so that flow can go in there. Speaking of gaps, let's go to one of the most famous gaps in a freeway. While we're talking about 90s movies, this might be appropriate. So let's try to find the famous gap in the freeway that a city bus can actually jump over. So we'll head there in Google Earth first, and then we'll have a look at our topography. So backing off, this is a pretty large intersection, so you can see it right here. And if I turn on HEC-RAS Mapper, let's see if we can put the gap into the terrain. So I think they say in the movie there's a 50-foot gap in it, and again, anybody with an engineering background will understand that this bus defies physics, that the trajectory would actually crush the bus. And Mythbusters has actually done a couple of episodes on that to show what would have actually happened to this bus in that instance. So let's have a look, though, at the terrain data. Again, if you are scoping out terrain data and how you might want it for your flood model, if you're doing an urban model, you may or may not want some of these things in it. So here's the filtered version right here, and here's the version with all of the points, including the no data values being filled in with the background terrain from the filtered data set. So if I wanted to build in a gap here, again, I think it's easiest to do it with the 1D reach, where you do one cross section on one side and one on the other, and then it will interpolate between the two. We could also here go in and use some of the terrain modification tools to do the same thing. Because keep in mind that if I do a terrain modification layer here that has this gap in it, and if I just wanted to do like a multi-point and have this be the speed gap, if I wanted to put this in here and have it draw from the existing terrain, it's going to draw from the existing terrain everywhere, including where it's high. So if I replace the terrain value with that, it's not going to come out looking right. So I could just alternatively look at the elevations on either side, about 45.8, and then go back in here and modify this layer and edit the polygon modification and add that elevation to it right here. So I'll put in 45.8, and that way when I cut through this section right here, if I'm coming along this way, we'll go ahead and plot that terrain profile, and here comes the bus, and yeah, sure enough, it's going to smash right here. It's never going to make that without a ramp. And again, Mythbusters built that ramp. We could build one in here too and show what it would take. But again, just back for your flood model, sometimes you'll want some of these things in the terrain, other times you want them not to be in the terrain. You may need to do roadway drainage over the top of something and have roadway drainage across the bottom. Probably best to just analyze those separately. So to round off the 90s, there are a few TV shows we could go visit. We could go find Melrose Place, which is just up the street here, 90210, which I guess from where it was filmed should have been called 91411. But I want to find something that has a water feature in it, and so we'll stick with Friends here and go find the Friends Fountain. Alongside that one, when we find the Friends Fountain, we'll also find plenty of other movie sets along the way. You're supposed to think it's in New York, but all of these locations are actually quite close. Central Perk is over at Warner Brothers, where we just saw the Wish You Were Here studios, and along with, what else do they have there? Dukes of Hazzard, ER, the Waltons, Batman, Spider-Man, all those things at the Warner Brothers studios. Now the fountain is up at the Warner Brothers Ranch. Let me pull this into HEC-RAS Mapper here, which is a few blocks away from the studios. So right here in the area, we've got a few other filming locations that we'll have a look at shortly. But I did want to show you first how we might model this fountain. So the fountain actually shows up in the terrain, and I've combined a few of these here. If you look here at the underlying terrain, one of the things that happens in this one is that the terrain that I brought in actually came in with some no data values that automatically got replaced. So this pool here had no data values in it. And I actually just brought these together in QGIS and didn't even, in the first time around, I wasn't paying attention, and it automatically set all no data values to 0 elevation. Well, have a look at what that does. When I turn my Google Hybrid off here, have a look at the elevations out here. I'm at 170 meters above sea level, and it drops down to 0. So I would probably need to go back in and replace some of these. So I'd be better off with no data values than 0 values, but you could use the raster calculator, as we've shown a couple of episodes ago, to just replace all the 0 values with some number that would be a little closer up here, or you could replace the zeros with no data values and then go ahead and draw a shape around the outside and only replace the no data values with either a building coming up or a pool or a pond or something going down. So because this is getting so long, I'm not going to demonstrate how I did this, but or do it live, but I'll just show you or tell you what I did here, which was to put some concentric circles in with the add modification tool, and I just put them all with the center at the same point. And so to build this fountain, you can see then on the outside here, I've got ellipse number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so when I cut through this, all I did to make this fountain was to have the outside of it come up over at the same elevation, back down again very close to it, over so the fountain comes around the outside, and then I have this thing on the top which is going to hold some water. So that's my fountain. So now let's put an internal boundary condition in the middle of it and see what happens to the flow. So I just brought an internal boundary condition that was circular and enforced that it's roughly circular here as a refinement region, so you can see the internal boundary condition there. And so now let's look at what happens when this thing floods. If it started emitting water and it was coming out way too fast and starting to spill over the side, let's turn on particle tracing and make sure that it's coming out from the middle. Check that out. So look at these patterns that you get inside of here, these circular patterns. So it's spewing out of the middle, coming around the outside of the fountain there. This does look a little spooky, but that's fine because you've got the bewitched house right here. So maybe, where's that? That's the bewitched house. We also have the I Dream of Jeannie house. WandaVision was filmed around here. Partridge Family house, I think, is right there. A lot of famous sites here. So let's see what happens when that spills. And again, watch out with this pool because the depths might be somewhat reasonable when you look in here at these depths there, but the 8 meters of depth, so it's collecting a lot of water. But when you look at the water surface elevation, if I go in here and look at the max on this one, the max water surface elevation is also way down. Up here you're at 170, and down here you're at 10. So yeah, watch out because there's a massive hole, over 100 meters deep right here in this area. So it's just something to watch out for. This might be sucking up more flow than you intended. So let me try turning that fountain into a zoom background. There you go. What do you think? All right, it's time to end this video. Let's have a look. We're through the 90s now. Let's move into the 2000s with just 1 or 2 stops, and then we'll call it quits. Now, the 2000s started out with the first of about 150 Fast and Furious episodes, and so I think we'll go ahead and head over to Dodger Stadium, where the opening scene of the first one starts with the late Paul Walker. And so we'll head over to Dodger Stadium and see what we can find there in the terrain with HEC-RAS Mapper. So there's Dodger Stadium, and let me pull in HEC-RAS Mapper here, and if I turn off Google Hybrid, you can see the stadium there, and here's the parking lot where he's doing donuts. Here's the view as a from the stadium parking lot as a tribute to Paul. And let's go in. I'll draw a flight path here that will give us his perspective in this opening scene. So I'll do a new flight path layer here, and we'll call this Walker Donuts. And let's go ahead and come around like this, and I think he starts spinning around. I just want to show you, this really doesn't have a hydraulic meaning, but we'll just spin around a few times and show you that you can overlap in the 3D viewer and spin around. So here it is in the 3D viewer, and this is kind of a ground perspective. Again, I've got a massive terrain, so it doesn't have a lot of resolution in it. Let's get right down on the ground there, and we can slow it down as we spin around. And yeah, that's the tsunami that has come in and hit LA. So that's what we're seeing from the bank there, from the edge of the hillside. So is there anything else we want to cover for the 2000s? There's probably got 20 other places we didn't stop. Kept finding more and more places that were recognizable just right here in La La Land. So again, throughout the 2000s, we had all the disaster movies, Day After Tomorrow, San Andreas, 2012, etc., which we already hit. We've covered those, but maybe to close it out, let's just go back to a familiar freeway. So let me pull Google Earth back in here, and we'll go to the place where La La Land's opening scene was filmed, and then close it out from there. And what I thought was interesting about this one is that we've just been here. We were just here earlier. I don't know if you saw that little place mark there. But this just happens to be the same ramp that we just put the gap in for the Speed movie. So when you've seen that scene as they pan up and head out there, you can see the city, the view of the city, just the same as you can in the movie here. Let me just go back to the overview here and just show you La La Land and where we've been just today in this session. So if anybody wants these KMZ files, I'll zip them up and make them available. I'll put a link to that down in the description. Do give us suggestions. Some of these models are going to turn into the tutorial models for our new 6.0 training manual, and again, we may as well have some fun with it. Go with something familiar. It's the same concepts either way. So there are a lot of other sites we'll hit in some future videos, but I promise I'll break them into shorter chunks. Sorry, we need to make one more stop because I've got my Empire Strikes Back shirt on today. And even though there are no Star Wars filming locations around LA, we can end here at Smuggler's Run, and where there is at present a full-scale Millennium Falcon. But let's have a look at what Google Earth shows us and what our terrain data is going to show here. So Galaxy's Edge was still under construction at the time. Maybe we'll do a future episode where we put the Millennium Falcon back in here with terrain data. We could flood it with some of the water here and maybe demonstrate some additional HEC-RAS capabilities along the way. So we haven't even touched on half of the things that have been brought up on some of the previous webinars with Gary Brunner.